All right. Well, we are so pleased to have this opportunity today to hear about the external review findings and to talk about our next steps in living into our goals about internationalization here at Cal Lutheran. So thank you for being here. We're also recording this so others can listen who weren't able to be here today. You know, it was back in 2020 that Cal Lutheran was selected as one of 10 colleges and universities to participate in the ACE Internationalization Laboratory. We were part of the 18th cohort. Since 2002, more than 150 institutions nationwide have participated in this program. ACE, you're probably familiar with them, but they are the American Council on Education. ACE is a major coordinating body for more than 1,700 colleges and universities and other related associations, both in America and abroad. ACE helps shape public policy and fosters innovative, high-quality practices in higher education. The Internationalization Laboratory is just one of many, many programs that ACE runs. So the laboratory looks at best practices in internationalization with special emphasis on curriculum, faculty and staff support, mobility, and partnerships. And you'll recognize this. See if we can get this going. Oh, there we go. So you'll recognize this model here. This is the ACE model for comprehensive internationalization. And these are the areas that they focus on, things like curriculum, co-curriculum, policy, partnerships, mobility. Our involvement with this program aligns perfectly with our mission to educate leaders for a global society. And as we explored campus internationalization at Cal Lutheran, we intentionally looked at how diversity, equity, and inclusion are also manifested in our global work. The ACE Lab is normally an 18-month initiative, but we had a pandemic that happened in the middle of ours. So it took us a little bit longer. We had a little more time to complete our project. And we set 4 goals for our project. The first was to do an audit, to look at what is currently happening on our campus. We had a lot of things happening on campus, and so we took a look and took an audit of what our current efforts are. Then second was to establish strategies for increasing global learning opportunities, looking at curricular programs and co-curricular programs. Our third goal was to identify the opportunities to strengthen DEI with our campus internationalization initiatives. And then finally, to prepare a draft strategic plan for internationalization for the next 5 years. We created 5 subcommittees, and you'll notice these 5 subcommittees align with this ACE model. We have the faculty international engagement and learning outcomes, partnerships and agreements and visiting scholars, co-curricular opportunities, and then mobility, incoming and outgoing students, international admissions and student services of our incoming students, and our away programs and study abroad. You might have noticed when you came in that there's posters at the back of the room here. And on those posters, there are highlights and recommendations from each of these subcommittees. And following today's program, report data is also going to be posted on Cal Lutheran's ACE Lab website. So we've spent the last 2 years in regular meetings with the steering committee, with the think tank members, and with thought partners. Dozens and dozens of faculty and staff have participated in all of these efforts, and we are so grateful for all of your time and your effort that everyone has put into this. I also want to especially thank Cristina Sanchez for your leadership and your dedication to this project. You've provided excellent leadership in coordinating all of the efforts of everybody involved and in keeping us well informed, of our progress and motivating us through these last 2 years. So thank you. I think we should give Christina. Last spring, we submitted our report to ACE that summarized all of our work, and we also provided a summary to our campus here. That recording is on the ACE lab website, our Cal Lutheran lab website. So all of that information is available for anybody to listen to about what we learned through our own review. And then in May, we had 3 external reviewers visit our campus, and now we have their final report. Every institution that is involved in the internationalization lab is assigned a mentor. And we were extremely fortunate that our assigned mentor is actually the ACE Director of Internationalization, Dr. Kara Godwin. Dr. Godwin provided guidance throughout this whole process, and she is here with us today virtually. She's going to be providing an overview of the key highlights and considerations in the findings of our project. Prior to her work at ACE, Kara was a research fellow at the Boston College Center for International Higher Education. Kara is a Pell Grant recipient and a first-gen college graduate who earned her PhD from Boston College, an MS from Northwestern University, and she received her bachelor's degree from one of our sister institutions, Augustana College. We were really fortunate to have Kara's expertise along with her understanding of Lutheran higher education to help guide us through this process. And I'm going to hand off now to Kara.
Thank you, Leanne, for that lovely introduction, and hello to everyone there. I'm coming to you today from the Minneapolis area where it is 18 degrees. So I would love to be in your midst in person for multiple reasons. I'm going to share my screen in just one moment as I launch this. 1 second. All right, are you seeing the PowerPoint screen?
Yes.
All right, terrific. Thank you so much. So I wanted to share just a few highlights from this experience that you have had there at Cal Lutheran. I'm excited to say you're actually one of now 200 institutions that has been through the Internationalization Lab and will now forever be a part of the community, both at ACE and amongst these institutions that have gone through this process, just like you have, and the hard work that's involved with that. So what I'm going to share today is very cursory in terms of the recommendations, but your leadership team now has the report in hand that came from myself and the 3 peer reviewers that joined us on campus early, just before the summer break this year. But I thought I'd begin with where you began. It was a tough process and a tough time to be involved in this. So I commend all of you for engaging in this process at such a difficult time in higher education and really in our world. At the beginning of the cohort, when we opened, I shared this note that came actually from Loyola Marymount University's Vice President and Provost, Dr. Thomas Poon. And he had mentioned that these are the symbols for crisis in the Chinese characters. But incredibly, those symbols translate to the word opportunity. And I think that you very much embraced that, given the circumstances and given what you were also experiencing on your campus. So again, I commend you for that hard work. Also, where you started was from a very good place, in fact. You have a paramount commitment to inclusion and equity. You definitely illustrate comfort with discomfort, thinking about differentiating Cal Lutheran, and you're anchored in your values, which I'll come back to in just a little bit. And you were primed for growth, thinking about both your excellent and supportive leadership. You're ready to advance your strategic plan and your initiatives. You were also already thinking about synergizing the initiatives that were happening on campus, your offices, and the individual leaders that you have there. And I heard repeatedly and have continued to hear from your team about how global learning is positioned for all students and how much of a priority that is for you, which again, you should be commended for that work. So very briefly, I want to just highlight some of the key strengths that the review team called upon in the report. Leanne Provost Nielsen already mentioned your Lutheran mission, which is very important to what's happening here. And I remember in an early conversation with President Barlotta, she mentioned it's a mission that reinforces values and attitudes that endure even while the world changes at record speed. And again, I think that endurance is really a palatable way to be thinking about this experience in hindsight. So some of those key strengths that were called out, again, this is very cursory and there's more details in the report. You were involved in multiple, and maybe more than I've ever seen on any other campus, large scale initiatives. But that also meant that it was a promising moment for thinking about alignment and coordination. So I hope that has continued on your campus over the last couple of months. Also, key to Cal Lutheran's success in this work is your leadership and the structural organization that you had already put in place. The fact that Provost Nielsen participated at the steering committee level in this is absolutely invaluable. Along with Provost Nielsen, you had Senior Associate Provost of Educational Effectiveness and Institutional Research, Taiwo Ande, also very critical to the kind of work and the opportunities that you had. In addition to that, you had already established Dr. Sanchez's work as the appointed Associate Provost of Global Engagement, and the Center for Global Engagement was established before this process started. That gave you a home for the work that you were doing. And the peer review team was particularly impressed even with the space of the Center for Global Engagement. It was warm, it was welcoming, and it was inclusive. It felt like there were a lot of offices that were connecting through that point. You have already invested in and are thinking more about your undergraduate research, your experiential learning and internships, all that we know through scholarship are high impact practices and critical for undergraduate advancement in their higher education experience. You have an unfailing commitment to DEIJ, diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. And through staffing and leadership, you've now established a new CDO who has a global orientation, which was a very impressive piece, again, for this peer review committee. You are embracing and continue to wrestle with what it means to be a historically a Hispanic designated institution and how that can be part of your continued identity and your priorities going forward. And we noted as well the progress that you've made towards J1 visitor exchange visas. So all very good foundations for the work that you were doing in the internationalization lab. So I will give a few highlights of observations and recommendations. But these are things that I hope you'll discuss, wrestle with, and think a little bit more about as you go forward. So first, connecting to identity and centralizing your resources. Those two things aren't necessarily together, but I did put them on the same slide here. So focusing on faculty morale and prioritizing equity and justice. What the team wanted to point out here is that you have done a good job acknowledging, and we hope you will continue acknowledging, the fatigue, the burnout, and the ongoing efforts towards DEIJ. Cal Lutheran is not alone in being in this place in this moment, and I hope that you will embrace that. But to continue focusing on raising morale, prioritizing equity and justice, and how you're going to do that as a community involving everyone in the process. Also, we wanted to tell you to lean into Cal Lutheran's core community anchors. So the values of grace and generosity, inclusion, service to neighbor, and being in the messy middle, which is very much a part of this process, as is all kinds of strategic planning. We suggested agreeing on definitions and developing a strategic framework. So some suggestions that we made were thinking about things like elevating global diversity, building a global community of teacher scholars, action and engagement with the world. So some questions that you might consider: what is global? Why does it matter? How does it connect to Cal Lutheran's priorities? Thinking also about developing measurable learning outcomes, not just for students, but also for faculty and staff, and centering around learning and the thought of learning as all of these people are on a journey together thinking about these things. Fully realizing what it means to be an HSI. I know that that's something that you're embracing fully and continuing to think about. We also suggested further centralizing resources through the Center for Global Engagement, thinking about that as a hub for data and assessment, and also mobilizing offices and individuals in concert with one another to work towards your goals. Continuing to synergize internationalization and DEI. A few things that we mentioned. We were extremely impressed with your diversity, equity, and inclusion core team. And I will say that is one of the most memorable conversations I have had in the peer review process, looking across many institutions. You have a really energized and strong team there. We also suggested incorporating internationalization with that strategic plan specifically. Further, partnering with your center and helping that center be strong in mobilizing units together and leadership. Again, articulating learning outcomes for everyone on campus. And we also suggested a focus on faculty development. That is because they can be central mobilizers for changing and evolving the ethos of a community. Thinking, for example, about how to help faculty produce globally inclusive classrooms, culturally rooted pedagogy, and also opportunities for leveraging technology. So thinking about collaborative online international learning even further than you already have, and stretching that to help make global opportunities in learning and the diversity and equity and inclusion options that come with that available to all students and not just those who can participate in mobility programs like study abroad. We talked a lot as a team about using data and metrics. One of the things that we suggested is focusing on institutional processes and a defined strategy related to your internationalization goals. Regularly collecting and reporting both quantitative and qualitative data we felt would really strengthen the work that you're doing, and assessing what data is available now and what data is needed. I know this was something that your both the think tank and your subcommittees worked hard on. So just thinking about the findings that you have and where you might take those forward. Engaging leadership. So systematically and effectively talking with leadership on a regular basis about the findings and establishing a regular way to update them. And finally, I very much encourage you to think about an iterative approach around the data and metrics. And what I mean by that is it can feel overwhelming to try and do all of this at the same time. So thinking about how you can prioritize the things that need to get done, provide an opportunity to reevaluate over time, and add to the process in an iterative way can be a really helpful and effective way to deal with a big priority like data and metrics. Thinking about mobility and thinking also beyond mobility. So using resources strategically, we go into a little more information about that in the report. Always prioritizing safety, legality, and effectiveness. So thinking particularly about where you may have gaps in risk management that you want to improve upon. I would rocket those to the top of what you're working on around the mobility areas. Focusing beyond enrollment. I think this is an area where Cal Lutheran in particular can really set a benchmark and also move beyond where you are now to become a model institution. So thinking, what I mean by that is thinking about international student inclusion and success. So not just the numbers that you have enrolled and how you bring them to the institution, but what you're doing with them from the time that Cal Lutheran first starts working with them through their time as a student at Cal Lutheran and beyond in your relationship with them as alumni. And we offer some resources for thinking about that. Cultivating faculty and staff support and development, again, thinking about that development piece also for faculty and staff. Assessing your recent study abroad fluctuations. I know that was a big question that came out during the time that you were in the lab. And taking some time to really reflect and think about the data related to that, while considering DEIJ elements very carefully, can be a rich way to reflect on what might need to change. Do you need to make adjustments to programs? Do you need to increase or decrease programs? Do you need to try different types of programs, both in terms of access, but also in terms of the numbers that you're seeing? And also elevating the global experience for faculty to make better your teaching and learning and teaching and research opportunities, and thinking about how faculty can really leverage that in the work that they're doing already. Finally, aligning priorities and building community. So strategically aligning the global engagement with some things that we heard from President Varlata that were very important to her. So biotechnology and focusing on bioengineering and all the ways in which that is actually a terrific global opportunity, considering both the skill sets that are needed and the type of softer skills students are going to need to work in those fields. Also athletics and how athletics can connect to, or rather how internationalization can help advance the priorities that were set up around athletics. Finally, thinking about building a community and really using that to mobilize your global engagement goals. A few things that we mentioned were harnessing the School of Management experience with alumni abroad and the work that they've done. Thinking about building a festival of scholars to showcase your undergraduate research where you're already making lots of good investments. And finally, but certainly not least, is leveraging the ELC network and opportunities. That's something that we didn't get to explore as far as I would have liked during this process, but I trust that your community will be taking it forward. Remembering that the ELCA encourages, and you have in some of your materials, training graduates who are called and empowered to serve the neighbor so that all may flourish.
Our work, as referenced earlier, are available online. So for those individuals new to our Cal Lutheran community, you can go back way to the beginning when we first started and launched our series and overviewed everything associated with the ACE Internationalization Laboratory. So that recording from spring of 21 is online, as well as the spring of 22 internal review findings. And so this is when the subcommittees, our think tank members, shared comments and insights related to what was happening at Cal Lutheran. And that was what was built upon for the external reviewers who came in and were able to use that in addition to the discussions that they had with the community to then come back with their recommendations and findings as well. So we will be adding this presentation to that whole resource. And so at your leisure, you can go and listen to it again and again, but we'll be building off of that. This work would not be possible without the full campus community's involvement, and we will not be successful in moving forward with initiatives without that sustained engagement. And so not only do I wish to extend my sincere and deep thanks, it's so wonderful to see the individuals in this room today who've been so integral and very involved. Those who could not make it, we know that they are with us in energy and also helping us in moving forward and advancing our initiatives. So the steering committee, here today, we have the members of the steering committee who have helped us navigate throughout the pandemic. You graciously shared a round of applause to me, but I would not have been able to manage without colleagues who were tireless in their pursuits and helping to navigate. So a round of applause for Dr. Greg Freeland, Dr. Taiwo Andy, Dr. Leanne Wilson. And as many are in the room and the many who could not make it today, but the wonderful members who were on the think tank and really brought their perspective, their other current institutional lens, and took that deep dive into helping us explore everything at Cal Lutheran.